Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday webinar. I am Kevin Marheine, the digital marketing strategist here at Coretek Services. Today, we're going to be going through a presentation led by Mr. Chris Shalda, our senior solutions architect. In particular, he has a lot of expertise around cloud solutions, so he's going to walk us through the webinar today, focusing on Azure and app modernization and lots of other really good info there for you. So as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and enter those into the chat. We'll go ahead and at the end of the presentation take a few minutes to run through those. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over here to Chris and let him run you through the deck that he's prepared for today. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. And thanks everybody for joining today. If you haven't seen me before on one of these Tech Tuesdays, welcome. And if you have seen me before, thanks for coming back. I'm looking forward to sharing a lot of information with you today on this topic. And if you don't know me, like I said, my name is Chris Shalda, and I am our Senior Solutions Architect for our cloud solutions at Coretek Services, which does cover Azure as well as modern workplace type of applications through Microsoft. And really been at Coretek for about 13 years now, and consulting most of the time that I've been at Coretek, and more recently moved into the solution architect role. So I get to help customers on their cloud journey, helping to understand kind of like where they're at, where they're trying to go, how to get there, and just assisting them throughout the entire life cycle. So I have a lot of fun doing that, and this is a very hot topic that seems to come up a lot these days around what do I do with my applications? Do I just move them as they are to Azure? Is there benefit there? Do I do something to optimize or modernize them? So hopefully we'll be able to help you understand some of the decisions around that and where you can maybe get started. So what we're going to cover today in general is what is app modernization? What do you mean? What is it meant by modernizing an application these days? And why migrate those to Azure specifically? And then we'll get into what are the best approaches to modernizing your applications, because there are a few different paths that you can take. So I'll try to explain those. And then at the end, we'll talk about how both Microsoft and Coretek could potentially help you with that journey as well. And I will be answering questions at the end. So like Kevin said, put those into the chat and we'll try to address those for you there. So let's get started here. So app innovation and modernization, it really is tied around what I think is an industry standard term here about digital transformation. And the way that we see how Microsoft sees it is it's enabling things that you can do kind of better, faster, and more engagement with your customers. Be that whether your customers are an internal line of business, or maybe you have external customers, consumers, or you're a SaaS provider and your customers are another business potentially, like B2B. But in the end of the day, what this is trying to drive here is engagement with your customers, improving that, transforming your products in new ways, innovative ways that really sets you aside, apart from the rest of the market, optimizing your operations, and then also enabling your employees. So that's kind of in general, what this is being able to fuel by modernizing your apps. And it comes down to, I know we've all seen it, the accelerating pace of change around us, right? Every business these days has to, it's imperative, they need to innovate and change faster than they ever did before. And by using old infrastructure and traditional ways of building apps, those are becoming growth inhibitors for businesses. And especially today, you know, it is the world we live in with COVID-19 and this need for rapid innovation to roll out new business models, optimizing business processes, responding to customers and business regulations. There's just a real need to kind of push things forward. And we've been seeing a lot of momentum being built here. A lot of decisions have been made recently out of necessity for organizations and customers to move down this path quicker into modernizing their applications and innovating in ways they've never done before. And business leaders, in businesses, they want their employees to be productive wherever they're at, typically, and the business leaders want their employees to make decisions faster, which requires easy but controlled and secured access to data, being able to do reporting and analysis on that. You know, going away from the whole traditional IT holds the keys to everything and everything is an ask to get something. It's empowering the employees, the customers to get the information they need to, with the controls and guides around that too. So some of the things that might trigger wanting to go to do some application modernization is, there's a number of things here, right? I'll just touch on a few of them, but it might be that you want to reach more people across more platforms, right? So it's a scale type of a situation, or you have to ensure security with your data, your application, the information that's stored, and so that's going to safeguard your reputation, allow you to get into additional maybe areas in the market. You want to be able to maybe reduce your IT maintenance, for example, reduce your operational efforts so that you can put more time and energy and kind of investments towards the application itself and the value that that brings. So all these areas around, reducing time to market and cost through agility, reaching more customers and engaging them through scale, protecting the data through security, driving innovation and market differentiation, and kind of addressing the developer demographic that things are kind of changing, skill sets are changing, and you want to reduce that IT maintenance and improve flexibility. Those are all good areas, good reasons why you should be looking into app modernization. And what we're going to try to do is help you understand why Azure as well throughout this presentation too, so that you can know, I do believe that Azure is a great place where you can do all this. So you can modernize your applications and host those and kind of achieve all of those things on that previous slide. And I'm going to show you through the kind of different ways that you can go about the migration journey of what Azure can provide and how it makes it kind of more straightforward and simple, I believe, relatively to others out there, to start this app modernization journey and really to gain a lot of the outcomes you're looking for. So from an Azure migration journey, I'm just going to kind of go through this in terms of what does this typically look like, and this is generic across the board of however you're going to move your applications, whether we're going to talk about things like a lift and shift or all the way to a rebuild. But it all starts with top-down buy-in, making sure you have the right business case in place. Like, why are you doing this, right? What is the real reasons behind it, and ensuring that that's aligned between the business and IT is very critical for successful journey long-term. Making sure you make the foundational investments as well is huge, right? Make sure technically you have the technology that you need to get this done. You have the right processes in place, or at least you're starting to build those processes up, and that you have the right people and that they have the right skills to begin this journey. Now, this is foundational investments. This doesn't mean end all be all, what it's going to look like, in 5 years. You have to start somewhere. So just being intentional around it is really what it comes down to. And there are some great methodologies that we provide at Coretek that helps our customers get to that point. So what we do is we typically assess, where are you at? What do you have? What are you looking to move? Determine kind of how you're going to move it, where it's going to move to. You migrate it, move it to Azure in this case, and then you optimize. So that's where we're going to see that cloud is a very iterative process here. You're going to take lots of revs, and you may start somewhere and may not be the end result, but you come back and you take another rev, and I'll kind of explain how that might work throughout even the app modernization journey here, depending on what your needs are, kind of near term and long term as an organization. So if we break down this migration journey, so the first step here is going to be the first option really is lift and shift, is also commonly known as rehosting. So we're going to talk about that. That's really taking your VMs, your servers as they are, and really lifting and shifting simply to Azure in this case. So you're not really changing anything, but you are taking advantage of Azure. The next is application modernization, which we will focus on mostly today. And that consists of a few areas. There's refactoring, re-architecting, and rebuilding. We'll dig into that pretty deeply. And then the last one is SaaS. So replace, basically taking an application that you've created internally, and you're saying, you know what, it might be best for us just to move to another, a SaaS hosted application instead of trying to, lift and shift or modernize the application. So that's an option as well. And so we'll go through these different platforms here where, to IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, containers, platform as a service, serverless, and where these all fit in here today. And I love the side is this helps you to start getting an understanding of like, okay, why would I want to go towards the right here, towards the PaaS to the SaaS, even to IaaS, right? Well, if you look at this slide here, I think it's very telling where in the gray, this is the customer's responsibility. In the blue is Microsoft's responsibility when you move to Azure. And so obviously on-prem, it's pretty much all of your responsibility to maintain all of those areas of the whole application stack, if you will. As you just move to IaaS, some of those pieces start being taken out from your responsibility where that's being handled as a service for you. So you can focus on higher level parts of the application, but you still have things like the operating system. You got to deal with antivirus and patching and security at that level, right? And all the way up to the application. PaaS becomes very attractive if you can get there, in a manner where it makes sense financially to get to PaaS, because now you're just dealing with applications and data. That's where the value is, right, of what you're providing to your end consumer, end customer, is most likely in the value of the applications and data. It doesn't really matter what operating system you're running anything on at the end of the day to them. It matters what are you providing as an outcome from that application, from the data, right? And then SaaS is, right, you're not hosting it at all. It's really somebody else hosting it. So think like Office 365, right, where Microsoft is completely hosting that application for you. So you'll kind of see here, I'm going to kind of reference back to this of the different aspects of what we're talking about today. And really, you can move any workload or application to Azure. There's very few that you can't. Only thing comes to mind is some really old mainframe software. But at the end of the day, there's always a path. You can't move it as is, but you can. We've worked with multiple customers to get them there. But that might require, a rebuild or re-architecture. But at the end of the day, everything could be moved to Azure. And so you'll see lots of different things here, lots of different languages that are supported, right? You can do virtual machine servers, Windows Server, Linux, a bunch of different database options here. And the idea is there's a lot of great tools to make it easy to migrate, and partners out there like Coretek that can help you get there. So let's start off. I'm not going to dig into this too much, but just for sake of completeness here, talk about the lift and shift rehost here. This is that first option that you could do pretty much if you have VMs, you have servers, even physical servers, you can move to Azure. You're really just running VMs on Azure, and think of Azure as being your hypervisor at that point, that you don't have to manage what Microsoft is. This is if you need to move quickly, you've got a data center contract up, you want to just consolidate your data centers, you want to just get out of the data center business, lift and shift is a great option. We've seen a lot of success there. You do get some tangible benefits. They're not maybe as significant long-term as some of these other options that we're going to show, but there are benefits there, and it's been a proven reduction in TCO there. So this is where you're not going to really make much, if any, kind of changes to your code or your applications. It's just going to sit on that same operating system, move it to a VM in Azure. So kind of low friction there. Some customers start out this way, and sometimes we recommend that from looking at a data center wise of don't modernize the application first. Just if you need to get out of the data center, get everything lifted and shifted and then modernize. It sometimes makes it a little bit easier, and you get your feet wet in Azure. If you haven't done Azure yet, that might be a good place to start. Because like I said, it's iterative. You could always start with that once it's in Azure and move into the next phase and refactor, re-architect. So refactoring. This is where we're starting to see a lot of traction for customers, because I feel like this kind of, it's a balance between the, cost and benefits of getting to modernized applications, because there is some refactoring. Yes, there may be some changes to some of the code, some of the features that you have today with your, let's say, web apps and even databases, right? But it's usually fairly low bar there. You're not going to be kind of changing the way your application runs. It's just getting it to work on Azure and having Azure, basically Microsoft, manage a lot of those underlying components for you. So, most frameworks, most languages, common languages out there will work this way. And it's kind of think about like repackaging it, your code, and deploying it somewhere else. So you're not really changing a lot of what your code and the different services that you have, but you're just repackaging it. So you'd be taking advantage of things like Azure App Service, or using containers that are orchestrated through like Azure Kubernetes Service, for example. This applies to databases too. Maybe you refactor your relational, non-relational databases into Azure SQL database, managed instance maybe, or there's Azure Database for MySQL, Azure Database for PostgreSQL, and even Azure Cosmos DB, which can handle MongoDB, for example. You can refactor into those without making significant changes to your applications, your code, your databases. So you already have an existing skill set you want to take advantage of. You want to move rather quickly as opposed to some of the later options that may take some more planning and efforts and building and development work. This is a good middle ground, I'd say. So let's dig into some of these options here. So Azure App Service is one of the more popular options to start off with, because you can build your web apps, web APIs, mobile backends in there. There's a lot of great capabilities with it, fully integrated with DevOps tooling through Azure DevOps and even other third-party tools out there. A lot that's built in terms of monitoring, being able to deploy, have deployment slots, staging slots. You can have auto scale and load balancing, so you don't have to build that in. We have VMs, you have to kind of build that out yourself. Some of those things here, like the auto scale and load balancing, high availability, and auto patching is handled for you. So the idea is to reduce those operational costs there. You can deploy this out super quick. All you're doing is deploying your code, right? And a lot of great integration security capabilities. The other option would be containers. Like maybe using containers today, maybe you're not. You can look at options of moving to more of a containerized solution. What's really interesting is that, containers were born out of Linux, and really today you can now actually build your containers on Windows Server, if you're on some of the later versions of, if your code works for later versions of Windows Server. So this is a way that you can very easily have portability of your applications, even between on-prem as well as in Azure or on your developer workstation, for example. And it's going to be the same experience, the code is going to work the same way. Basically, it's not going to be dependent so much on those underlying components that you usually have to deal with traditional applications. So a lot of capabilities here, and the ability to scale out is easier here. The isolation of the different services and then the density of running all these services in a more economical way is something that you'd be able to take advantage of. So I can go through this in depth here, but this is really looking at containers as what's called kind of a common currency of development. And just the way that those applications are deployed, the way the system administrators manage their environments, right, can be changed for the better, and really can take advantage of a lot of different technologies, whether they're first-party tools through Azure and some of the things like Azure Container Registry, or third-party, like you can use Docker Hub as your image management, for example. So really the choice is yours around a lot of this. Microsoft just has kind of an end-to-end options, or you can just plug in some of your existing tools and capabilities into what Azure offers. But some of the things like Service Fabric and Azure Container Services, or AKS, Azure Kubernetes Services, would be the underpinning of a lot of that capability, so that you don't have to manage normal VMs anymore. So the next option here in the app modernization journey would be to re-architect. So re-architecting, what this comes down to is your application, you want to modify it, or you want to extend the existing application code to optimize application architecture for truly cloud scale, right? So for example, you might decompose a monolithic application into microservices that might work together and readily scale, and re-architect your relational and non-relational databases to Azure fully managed databases and service solutions, kind of some of the ones I mentioned earlier, and just to take advantage of the scale there. And sometimes here, when you might want to select this, is when your application is due for a major revision, right? You need to incorporate a lot of new capabilities, or you need it to work more effectively on a cloud platform. You want to take advantage of some of the existing application investments still, right? You don't want to throw it all away. You need to have scalability in a cost-effective way, right? So, and you don't want to have as many virtual machines out there. Good reason here too. This really it delivers a lot of new capabilities that you can take advantage of, reduces the volume of code needed to express a capability while still leveraging existing investments. So where this looks like here, just as a kind of view here, would be you might have a monolithic application typically on a virtual machine, and it has to run on for certain servers, and it's kind of tightly coupled in terms of the application code and what VM it's running on and what OS. And so you're a little bit more limited in terms of scaling out and changing things, because when you change one application or some framework on that server, it's going to affect all the other applications. And the microservices approach is what you're trying to do is decouple those application services so they can be more independent and really be discrete services that you can independently upgrade, update, patch, so that you can very quickly have iterations of new deployments without affecting the rest. And then those can be running across whatever servers, right? In the background. In the end of the day, everything on Azure is really servers, but it's what are you managing? If Microsoft's managing all these servers, right, that's less for you to do. And then if these are containers, in this example, they could run on any of those, it doesn't matter. And last one here, touch on this quickly, is rebuild. So this is really where, there's one less after this, but this is the last application modernization one. You might want to go completely cloud native of a past environment. This is really if you want to start from scratch with cloud native technologies. So let's say you're building a new application that you haven't really had before, right? Or you really want to, the other option could be you have a very legacy application, you just want to start kind of from scratch, same functionalities, right? But you want to do this from the ground up and take advantage of a lot of these capabilities within Azure so that you have less operational overhead, you have a lot of the capabilities mentioned earlier, scalability, agility, right? Cost optimization. This can significantly reduce your TCO because you are really taking advantage of a lot of things that are really going to be serverless, is what you're going to hear here. A lot less cost because they're really event-driven in a lot of ways. So the idea is that you really abstract from what is even a server at this point. Everything is very event-driven and it's instant scalable. And the billing becomes very kind of micro billing because it's just when something kicks off. It's not while you're running a server ongoing constantly, right? Because that's usually how it works with Azure. Otherwise, with consumption, is if you're running a VM, you're getting billed while the VM is running for every minute it's running. In this case, it's only being billed for each like transaction, basically, that's happening. And you can use a lot of different languages here: .NET Core, Java, PHP. I mean, you name it. The major languages are all covered. And so the idea here is that you're going to reduce a lot of the operational overhead, a lot of the DevOps kind of friction there, and be able to get to the market faster because you can deploy quicker, a lot less interdependencies, if you will. And you can focus on the logic of the application, right? Not the how do I get the application just to run on a platform. So the type of components that we're going to typically see here are going to be functions. I mean, functions are just really snippets of code. It's your code that's just getting run on demand based on events that you specify. Logic apps, you can put a lot of business logic in here, design workflows, orchestrate processes. Event Grid is kind of what's going to manage all those events that are going to trigger some of these actions from functions and logic apps. And that can talk to all these backend services here, from data and storage, messaging services, integration services, and tap into some other areas. Like this is when you start, from a crawl, walk, run, sprint, right? Take advantage of a lot of cognitive services, machine learning capabilities that can plug in directly into your application here. And then all the development here is just kind of, it's the same idea. A lot of it's the same type of tooling. Visual Studio you can use and Azure DevOps, but you're just working with a different type of platform than you would with either traditional VMs or even some of the other PaaS services available. So you can very much adapt to this even with some of the existing skill sets. So some of the scenarios here might be for serverless, and not every scenario is going to fit here. And some of these might be a combination of some piece of your application works with serverless and another piece is more kind of a traditional application or just, end to your application. That's okay. right? It all comes down to where are you at, where are you trying to go. But some things like real-time stream processing, right? Timer-based processing. So every so often, every 15 minutes in this case, on a schedule, go do something. Batching, right? Backends, so for mobile IoT and web backends, it can take care of certain kind of capabilities, functions, if you will. For real-time bot messaging, we're seeing a lot more kind of interactive bots, virtual agents, a lot of great toolkits and capabilities just built into Azure to get you off started really quickly. And then the last one, yeah, I think I mentioned before, right, is moving to a SaaS solution. So paying for a solution that somebody else is hosting for you so that you don't have to deal with any of this hosting. That could work for you. It depends on the solution. If you need some customization capabilities and things that SaaS provider could not offer, that's where you may need to do something on your own. If you're a SaaS provider yourself, obviously you're not going to go to another SaaS provider for your application, right? You are the SaaS provider, so wouldn't be an option for you there. But that is on the continuum. That is another option depending where you're at. One, like I mentioned before, makes a lot of sense. Office 365, why are you running your own Exchange servers? Why are you running your own SharePoint servers? Why not have Microsoft run those so that those people, those IT people that used to have to take care of those and maintain them and upgrade them and make sure they're running, why don't you can repurpose them to focus on the apps that are adding more direct value to your customers, whether it's internal, like LB, or externally. So I like this view too, just to kind of sum up. This is the continuum here of whether you're at left side here, IaaS, the infrastructure platform of just running VMs through containers, running on more of the PaaS services, or FaaS, like function as a service, serverless platform to the right. You'll see on the left side, there is more control, but it is less agile. On the right side, there's a little less control, but is significantly more agile. Right? So if you can fit your application into that model, it can gain you significant benefits to move more towards the right there. But you have to find out what works best for you, depending on what you're trying to achieve, where you're at, and you can always continue down the path and continue moving to the right if it makes sense for you. In general, too, another thing is that moving towards the right, typically assume more time is going to be spent planning, developing, right, building, and time is money, right? So it might be a little more investment up front, right? But the return on investment, ideally, if you do everything well, that you're going to get a good return on the investment in the long term. So just be aware that, might be a lower cost of entry for IaaS, a little higher cost of entry for on the other side of serverless platform, but you will get a better return the more further right that you would go. So great, that's all great information, but how do we get started? So how we handle this at Coretek, and what we agree with Microsoft's kind of direction and methodology here, is the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. If you don't know it, you should become familiar with it. I did another webinar, I think it was the last time. I did one was actually on this in the first few phases of strategy, plan, and ready. So I suggest you check that out. Check out our channel on YouTube for that. And so we start with this, making sure you have the right foundations. We use Cloud Adoption Framework. We have some offerings. This is one of them around an application innovation engagement, where we may modernize and migrate, including migration, right? 1 to 5 simple apps. We use a tool that will take a look at your source code, see whether it would be a good fit for app services or containers or functions or VMs, right? And it actually quantifies the amount of effort that would be required to get to each one. So you know up front what is going to be my investment to get there. And then we can also help you quantify what maybe some of the returns are too. So you can make really a data-based decision on where to start with and how to proceed. So this really helps a lot of customers get past the analysis paralysis, because you get empirical data out of this type of assessment. And then we would help you along the way of these first applications to get you started so that you can get your feet wet, understand what that looks like for you and your organization, and begin the journey. So what that typically comes down to is we do some sort of planning, defining the scope of those applications. They're using a tool depending on where we're looking specifically, usually either Unified Cloud, Stratazone, some of the Azure tools that are native. We do some architecture design and review for you, look through everything, what does that look like? We're doing the gap analysis and the assessment at this point. And then we come back and say, all right, well, here's the migration plan. This is what it would look like. This is the gaps that we saw. And we collaboratively would help kind of define that direction and where that's going to go and how you get started. And then phase 4 would be we start that migration and the modernization. So this is kind of a typical methodology of ours, depending on complexity, right? The timelines may vary, right? But in general, we can get some value pretty quickly. So that's really all I have today. I really appreciate everybody's time. Hope this was valuable. I'm going to take a look at the chat here to see if we have any questions. And if you do want to reach out to us, you can reach out via email at inquiry@coretek.com or hit me up on LinkedIn there. My address is there. I guess my page is there, the URL. And I'll take a look at the questions here, see if we have a couple. All right, here's one. Okay, so do I have to modernize my database at the same time as my application? All right, so good question there. So not necessarily. If there's a good reason that you need to get your application modernized first or ahead of your database, and maybe your database is not in a state in which it can be modernized without significant amount of efforts, we have seen customers do one before the other, and there may be a couple changes need to be made to integrate between those two, but yeah, absolutely, they can be done independently. Always considerations, but it's not a hard no, let's just say. All right, good one. And last one I see here. All right, so do my apps have to be currently running on Windows to work with Azure App Services, or would Linux work too? Okay, yeah, so one of the common misconceptions we see is that since it's Microsoft Azure, everything is Microsoft Windows, right? That not necessarily the case. You'd be surprised. Most workloads, most VMs on Azure are actually running Linux. It's a different Microsoft these days. It is really your choice, and Microsoft is making all these choices available from all these open source options, third-party options, and they're enabling a platform to use those tools and those types of, whether it's Linux, open source types of applications, what have you, and in different open source languages as well. So yeah, absolutely, Azure App Services does work both with Linux and Windows, and both Linux and Windows works with containers now too. Okay, well, I think that was all the questions I saw. So yeah, thank you again for your time, and feel free to reach out if you'd like to know more about where Coretek could help you on your application modernization journey. And I hope you have a great day.